Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black end. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I'll get right to it. The next one I do is probably going to be related to colorism and why, as a matter of fact, men of my phenotype have more reason to be in the manosphere and not less, as far as I know. Miss Philosophy and Brady Hartsfield would be welcome to chime in at that point, as well as telling Stewart and Caesar Cannon after I release it, if they choose to do a live stream afterwards, and I might do that, but that will probably be a week from now. I'm recording this at this point Sunday morning, your time, Sunday afternoon, my time. But it'll probably be the next Sunday before I could do a live stream if they requested it. However, this one's about something else. It is going to be about men in general, African-American men that find a lot of, find that in actuality their options get stifled if they're trying to stay within the race, that their options are the ones that are stifled, muffled, reduced, the way that sisters have told us for decades that theirs are when they get an education. When a man says that he has few options, or even only options that are likely to have an interest in taking what he has earned for himself, and not the options that also earn for themselves and match what they look for in men, then we know the reactions. We know the backlash that will come from it. It's always the man's fault, no matter how difficult the women in the West are naturally or taught to be towards men. And unfortunately, this is so even here in the Middle East to a certain extent among the young men. Generally, having a girlfriend is not something for which a man can brag in public, but it is something for which he might brag to his circle of friends if they're the irreligious kinds of friends that have no fear of God. However, if he is somewhat religious, then not only can he not brag about this to his friends, he can't even run with that circle of friends to whom he would be able to brag about, the ones that would validate that. They would look at him and say, no, you don't get to do that. No, if we do it, that's an accomplishment. If you do it, that's a failure. You see, a religious man is not blamed for liking women, and a religious woman is not blamed for liking men, but they're expected to marry if they can, not to fornicate, let alone commit adultery. And I wholeheartedly agree with this. This is our faith, and we don't change it. Even those of us who do fornicate or ever commit adultery have to confess that it's wrong. Because if a Muslim does these things and then tries to justify them, if a Muslim doesn't do these things and tries to justify them, that's apostasy. Committing the sins and admitting that they are sins is actually better than not committing them and then trying to make them non-sins, because that counts as disbelief. So here the pressure on a man to be validated by ladies is existent if he has those westernized friends, but it is not nearly as pervasive as it is in the West, where you are sitting down listening to me now. Here, it is very situational, but in the West, it is throughout, and no one has considered how difficult it is in the first place to get Western women to validate most men they see sexually. And when I say sexually validate, I don't only mean to choose a man sexually for herself, but I also mean for her to understand if another woman is attracted to him and finds him to be her type, even when the other woman may have options. So simply put, I guess the best way to describe it would be if Kenya's not into him, she's got a different type, that's fine, but Kenya has to understand why Aisha could choose him. Kenya has to be okay with it if Aisha chooses him, even though Kenya would not. And we already know that's not how that works. If Aisha don't like him, she ain't into him, she don't want Kenya to either. Both of them gotta like him for either one to be able to justify socially why she's out with him. So to sexually validate a man also means to validate other women's individuality and the right to judgment independently of the hive mind. This is not the socialization of the West, and sometimes it is not the socialization of other cultures. And they may or may not insist that women agree on whom they will sexually validate as even having the right to not be condemned to celibacy. That depends on which culture. When you leave the West, cultures differ, so I don't tell you that everywhere outside the West is better automatically, and I don't tell you that every place outside the West will remain as good as it is. I just simply tell you that the West has its guarantee of it being this bad. See, the Matrix is coming for Zion too, as I said. It's already beginning to be a problem in Bangladesh, parts of Latin America, Malaysia, and in South Korea. It's already been an issue for well over a decade, probably for two. The issue here is that of pressure on men, the gender that doesn't make it hard on the other gender, to win the validation of the other gender that is known only for its tendency to not validate sexually most of the pressured gender being the men. There where you are, the fact that many women will only validate a few men is of no bearing. You are still under the same pressure, and you will still consider to be a special failure among failures. If you fail this, that most men statistically have to fail. Even, as a matter of fact, especially by the very women themselves that would not validate you. Here where I am, this pressure is rare, and it is limited to circles of loser friends who don't amount to much anyway. And the fact is that many men winning sexual validation from women to whom they aren't married would only mean that the society is in serious trouble, because it means that most of their sisters have become sluts and their daughters will next. They understand, if they think for a few seconds, here they understand that every man being sexually validated by many women means every female relative of theirs is doing the validating directly with her own genitals and no marriage contract. They have no issues with their own married female relatives validating her own husband or their own husbands. Their cousins and sisters and daughters and moms having boyfriends, let alone validating, is a damn problem. And for many of them, the thought of their male relatives having girlfriends and giving some penis is also unbearable. Because they're far less blinded by sexual double standards than we were, and far less blinded than we stereotyped them to be here. So when I tell you that many black men are artificially limited in a broken culture to options in women that should not even stand a chance, and when any other black man in the West says this, the proper response is not for her or her goons to say that you're just bitter or you just failed or it's just you. The proper response, though we don't realistically expect it, is for them to admit that yes, they have successfully taught the black population in the West a double standard in which black men must stay in our lanes. Shout out to Obsidian for bringing this up. And black women are not limited to any lanes because they have vaginas and tits. This lane for black men is always inferior to what our lanes would be in functional cultures, sadly. And so what they really mean is that black men must stay in lanes assigned to them, not arbitrarily, but specifically because the lanes are inferior to his actual league. And it gives her more bang for less buck, literally. More buck, I should say, for less bang, by which I mean she gets more bucks out of him in exchange for infrequent and inferior quality banging. Somehow it always remains our fault, no matter how rigged the game is from the very first whistle against us. The other team is the referee, and the referee is the other team. I don't know of a better definition for a rigged game than that. And even our own coaches, PUAs, are thinking from the standpoint of this being perfectly okay. And that you should have no standards like theirs, which you must meet. How dare you say they must come to you? How dare you judge their reactions to your approaches, let alone their approaches if they even approach you? This is unforgivable to them. This independent thinking is darn near considered blasphemy, as though it goes against the King of Kings and Judge of Judges himself. Again, the game starts with the assumption that you have a negative value and theirs is infinite. Your challenging this assumption must be characterized as insane and unrealistic. Because once it gains traction, there's no rigging the game anymore. And you have no reason to accept that you must always play uphill for both halves of the game. This is why I told you previously, gentlemen, to stop negatively pricing yourself and your genitalia and have some ideas of chastity. And the best reason to be chaste is the king himself. Second best reason is still a good one. And that is because there's no reason for her to be and you not to. Besides the sexual standards and demands of many ladies in the West, there aren't really chastity anyway, as much as it is besides, choosing as pride and materialism. What you got to go through is to get them is usually not in any way related to chastity. It's just them being picky and proud and materialistic. If you're actually chaste, you'll be ahead of them anyway. For the record, any ladies hearing this and getting angry, are the ones who want you men to be always sexually available without conditions, while they have standards and restrict sex to their conditions, which I just told you include satisfying their lust, their materialism, and their social obsessions. The ones listening and not getting upset are the ones that don't have any sort of ill intentions towards you. So when we discuss the fact that we have less options than we should, even the most attractive of the most alphas, according to Western black women themselves, be prepared for them to come back with why it is your fault. Listen closely to me now to get yourselves prepared, because while it doesn't matter to you what they'll say, it will matter to the young black men with whom you must have these talks, and to which these hens will squawk their usual BS in response, so as to convince these young male relatives of theirs and yours to remain blue pill, brainwashed, and plugged in. I'll first remind you of what they say in response, but you've heard it before. Then I'll tell you not what to say in response, but what to understand and remember, because if you understand and remember, you'll then know what's best to tell any individual lady that replies to your truth with the patent bullcrap responses. What they're going to say in response is, who hurt you? This is a red flag right off the bat. Well, you just mad because you can't. That's another one. And frankly, the responses to these really are very obvious. Who hurt you? Well, you don't know her, do you? Chances are you don't know who she is. I mean, hell, who hurt you? Everybody gets hurt for the most part. That doesn't make anyone special. You just mad because you can't. Well, it's usually deeper than that, but if that was the case, so goddamn walking foot. I mean, if everybody else could, yes, I should be insulted if I'm the only one that can't. But usually it is much deeper than that. Because we respect women's rights to choose and to prefer. We don't respect their right to lie and deceive. And most men listening to me don't even justify men doing these kinds of things. So we're not the ones that need to hear this stuff about what men do. We're not the ones doing it. Another one, oh, nigga, you gay. Simply put, what I'm saying is they're going to do anything to deflect and try to minimize your intentions for saying it in the first place. What's wrong with you? Well, you need to look in yourself and see what's driving them away. Well, you're the only common denominator in all of your failures and your successes. No, that's something you tell ladies because they have the option to fail or succeed. I mean, hell, they can make approaches and have a much higher success rate than any man can. That's why that is an okay thing to say to ladies and not an okay thing to say to most men. They're going to say it. Be ready. Now, here's what you must understand and remember. Not only does it not matter what is wrong with you, but in most cases, she, and she, the ones at whom you shot your shot, or tried, or maybe even just the ones with whom you became friends, don't even know what's wrong with you, to be honest. When you don't have a chance from the gate off the top, then they can't tell what's wrong with you anyway. They didn't allow the chance for that to manifest in front of them. That means that they don't know. Most of us men don't have a chance with most ladies, numerically speaking, from the beginning, so that doesn't make you some kind of special failure. And again, it's not wrong. Women don't have to choose every man, and we ain't got to choose every woman. And I'm telling you, we really should choose very few. But when you don't have a chance, matter of fact, when you don't have the exact same chance as these bad dudes to get to break hearts and maybe even ruin credit scores too, then your flaws aren't even material to the outcome. And ironically, you have less of a chance to learn and identify and correct your own flaws, because you aren't going through practice dummies like the few men that they want are going through practice dummies. You're being prejudged, and then when you do get chosen, either she's coming with a lot less of what you want from her than what she wants from you, or, i.e., those options to which I'm talking about you being unfairly limited, or she's going to find a flaw that is more based on just lack of knowledge and experience than any ill intention, and she will bounce on you for that reason and ghost you. Because the greatest sin to a Western woman, a wicked witch of the West, is not being pursued by other women already, which most men are not by default. This means you started off with few chances and a small probability in the first place through no fault of your own, and therefore a low probability and small chance of them ever knowing any real flaws of yours at any point in time. So no, it's not necessarily the way you dress. I mean, it could be. But if you were to dress like other men and that doesn't change anything, then that's obviously not it. It's not your attitude. I mean, if your attitude were the same as others and it doesn't make a difference, then it's obviously not your attitude. If you're practicing the same hygiene as the ones who succeed, but it doesn't make a difference, then it's obviously not your hygiene. Now, maybe your attitude is one of being tired of being confused by mixed messages, but that's a justifiable attitude. Are you blaming the ones that didn't have anything to do with it for that? If you're not doing that, then it's not your attitude. It's not your lack of confidence. I mean, maybe you're less confident than someone else, but understand that repetition is the parent of skill. And they're not going to let you go through too many of them to gain the skills that they demand. Now, let's say it's the lack of confidence. Well, that could be the case, but if you're coming with the same confidence as somebody else, and they're interpreting that as either you're not confident or you're arrogant, then that simply means they're looking for some extreme in the first place. That means that your real flaw, again, doesn't matter because they didn't find that flaw. They just made it up. If you're simply honest about what you're good at and what you aren't good at, they'll interpret that as a lack of confidence anyway in many cases. Because they'll ask you about some talent you're not very likely to have, and when you say that's not your forte, then they can turn around and, stretch and reach and say, oh, you lack confidence. They can't say he's in the middle or I don't know about this particular trait of his yet because I don't know him that well. I want you to keep this last sentence in mind. I don't know this about him because I don't know him that well yet. How often have you ever heard an attractive Western black woman saying this about a man? This is giving him the benefit of the doubt. Now, there are times we've heard them say this, but they don't say, I don't know this about him yet because I don't know him. The only time they'll say something like similar to that is actually when they're saying, you don't know these things about him, but I do because I know him. And that's actually when they're saying this about a man that is fitting negative stereotypes. I actually, in my life, have never once heard an attractive woman say the first one about a man. I don't know this because I don't know him that well yet. I've never heard them say that about a man that wasn't fitting negative stereotypes. Every time I heard an attractive or even decent looking Western black woman say this, they were telling someone else that he or she did not know these things about her man. And every time that they were defending a man like this, he had tats, golds, stereotypical swag, or an outright reputation for what we associate with the tats, the golds, and the stereotypical swagger. No exceptions to this in my life. Now, how often have we heard decent or even high-value black men in the West saying this about unknown or new women they recently met? I don't know this about her because I don't know this yet. I'm still learning about her. If I see this bad thing you think you see, yeah, I'll drop it. If I don't, I'm just saying I'm going to give her a fair chance. We've heard men that were decent and even high value say this about sisters when they were told certain things. See, we're always socialized to admit what we don't know about her and not stereotype and not jump to negative conclusions, while she is told to always assume the worst about us unless white folks and bougie Negroes like myself have a cosmetic and voluntary reason on the guy's part to assume the worst about him. In the end, the opportunity for your flaws to even matter is not there. Therefore, do not listen to them tell you about some flaws of yours, except for those who have had a chance to see them, and even then make sure that those particular ones aren't reading too much into basic things that you've done, like overanalyzing why you opened the door for her or did not open the door for her. And make sure that if they do say anything about what you did and what that must mean, make sure that the opposite or the other option from the action of yours she's analyzing would not have resulted in her assuming the opposite extreme about you. In other words, if she's saying to you, well, you were looking down a lot, you didn't have your chest poked up and your back straight, make sure that she's not the kind of person that would have taken you looking up with your chest out and your back straight as some kind of arrogance. If she was the type that would have done that, that's it, toast. Chances are it would, though, because she knows she's trained to choose the wrong things in a man, specifically in black men. And she knows that she must claim some ability to analyze and read men to justify why she eliminates the men that don't fit our enemy's negative stereotypes that a man must fit to justify her choice in him to her friends, which is really what it comes down to. You may have flaws you need to fix. Everybody does. You must, because you're human. Nonetheless, they have to actually give it a chance before they can talk to you about what your flaws are. They got to get to know you. And then they got to be honest. And if you're not finding these in them, step out. Put it to the test. And then come back and say, how come the negress, the Western negress, is the only one that has all this fly stuff to say? I want to give a shout out to Jay Cash as well, because Jay Cash, you rightly pointed out that once one of them gets hurt, they have an undisputed right to have these walls and barriers up. And no matter how many times you as a man get hurt, lied to, deceived, made to regret, or anything of that nature, you are told to never have up walls and barriers, and to just leave yourself open for somebody else to come along and do the same exact furthermucking thing without even so much as a question why you were chosen for this and how you can not be that mark. You're not allowed to ask that question. You're not allowed to defend yourself. And see, what Jay Cash was telling us, whether he realized it or not, was that in this war, you are being told you don't have a right to defend yourself. Forget retaliation. You don't have a right to defend yourself. And that's one of the reasons why they'll say to you, don't ever say that maybe you don't deserve to have someone in your life. See, if you talk that way, they'll say, oh, no, you need more confidence. But if you believe you deserve to have what is being withheld from you, as long as you're actually behaving in such a way to deserve it, even then, they're actually happier in that case, because they get to come along and tell you that you don't. Notice this, they love to come along and tell you the opposite of whatever you say to them, especially when you don't assume the worst about yourself. They love that because they can come along and then just tell it to you so they can talk down to you. And the goons and mamdingos are the same way. But until the day that you actually have the same chance as the one they gave to whoever it was that ruined their credit and ruined their heart and ruined their ability to love, they need to fuck the shuck up about what your flaws are. Not because you don't have any flaws, but because how the huck do they know what these flaws are in the first place? Now you'll know what to tell any individual that decides to come at you with this, who hurt you, you're just bitter, you just mad because you didn't get to smut out Big Booty Keisha, or whatever the case is. Say when you do respond though, say to them first, are you done? Yeah. When you get that answer, yeah, then you say in a very low voice, calmly, without a lot of distracting noise, in a low voice, very calmly, whatever it is you want to tell them. Don't raise your voice. Start screaming, and especially don't raise the pitch of your voice. Say it at a medium or a slow speed, in a low tone and a low pitch. Whatever it is that you know they need to hear. And if they interrupt you, say to them, you said you were finished. They interrupt you, interrupt them. You said you were finished. I'm willing to hear you out. And if they interrupt again, then you say the conversation's over because you don't want to take turns talking. that means you're hiding something. And that's perfectly okay. And you win every argument in that case. J. Cash, thank you, man. That message this morning was everything. I mean, it summed it up. And that's exactly, I guess, if I had the ability to brainwash somebody with whom I was at war, I would probably do the same thing. Thank you for listening. Black Heart, Black Mind, Black Out, Assalamu Alaikum, and Black Heterosexual Unselected Male Power just because they don't like it.